Welcome to the Cali High podcast, episode 36. I'm your host, Chenzo Nico, and this week we are blessed to have one of the top women in cannabis podcasting, Scanlon of the How to Do the Pot podcast, an innovative and informative show that highlights how women interact with cannabis, from sexual to medical and beyond. Her podcast does exactly what it says. It tells women how to do the pot. And so without further ado, let's speak with Ellen. Good afternoon. This is Chenzo, and I'm here with Scanlon of Do the Pot podcast. Thanks for coming on, Ellen. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. So, you have a podcast called Do the Pot, where you demystify weed for women and speak about herb and its medical benefits and specifically how they relate to women. You also give various guides about buying and which strains to buy. So I was just wondering, how did you come up with this idea for the podcast?
Sure. Well, the podcast is called How to Do the Pot, and it's sort of a long name, but when we were thinking about creating one, we were talking to friends and family about what we were doing and would joke around and say, we're going to teach you how to do the pot. And everyone would laugh. And so we thought, that actually might be the right name to start with, because when we started this, it was 2.5 years ago. And so that seems like not a terribly long time, but in cannabis, it's a very long time. Mm-hmm. And so, we really felt that having some humor and just some kind of lightness and whimsy would help people understand something which at that point was probably fairly foreign to them, because we really are speaking to women consumers who may or may not have any experience with cannabis, or maybe their experience was, many years ago and it really doesn't look anything like what modern cannabis is today.
Yeah, I thought some of these issues were like, well, we already know, but no, we need to go over these issues, especially for people that haven't been smoking for 50 years. So, you have a partner, April Pride, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I was listening to one of her episodes, and she talks about certain strains being more inclined to enhance the sexual experience, such as Sherbinski's, Gelato, Girl Scout cookies, Super Silver Haze, and something I never heard of, Pink Kush from Toronto. And do you agree with her? And which strain would be your favorite in this case?
Well, so April and I co-created the show, and April was the host until a couple of months ago, and I took over as the host. And the series on sex, it's 3 episodes, and it came about in kind of late fall. We were still, all of us were very much in the midst of COVID and all of the stressors that brought. And we were trying to think about something that would just be a little bit fun. And we know that women have a lot of questions about sex. And so we decided that our entire month of February was going to be all about sex.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, it was. And the way that we broke it down was in 3 parts. So I think for women, there are a lot of different sex has a lot of different components, and there's a physical component, there's a mental component, and then as it relates to weed, there's sort of a what should I buy component. So Our first episode was about sensation and how things like weed lubes can really help women, especially if women experience any kind of pain with sex. Talking a lot about the physicality of cannabis and what it can bring. And then we had another episode about the mental effects of cannabis and how we say sort of getting out of your to-do list so that you can be more present and enjoy the experience. And so much of cannabis, in my view, is about being present. So I think that if you are intentional with whatever cannabis you're consuming, you're going to be more present, which is going to make sex more enjoyable. And then we have a show just about strains. And we had some amazing experts, Sherbinski, who I'm sure you know, and a woman named Antoinette Gomez, who's based in Canada, who has a huge empire that she's building all around sex.
I think I listened to that one.
And so we got some great recommendations, because I'm happy to share my recommendations, but we feel like part of what we have with How to Do the Pot is a platform to hear from lots and lots of different people, because as we all know, everybody experiences cannabis a little bit differently.
Yeah. Well, and what would be your favorite strain or recommended strain in this? Like, I suppose there's the mental aspect, like you just said, and then the physical aspect. And I notice these strains they're kind of, are they leaning towards, they're hybrids, but they're leaning towards sativa, are they? Or
You know, we go back and forth about
yeah,
how to talk about
it's
strains with that convention.
you can't really figure it out anymore, I swear.
The takeaway really was lower THC is going to create a better experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever strain you enjoy, whether, you know, you are really into terpenes or whether you are super clear with what you want with a sativa or an indica, I
Mm-hmm.
think that having less THC than you might regularly have
Mm-hmm.
was definitely a recommendation that came through very much.
Mm-hmm.
Another one was, don't try this with a partner kind of for the first time. You really need to experiment with yourself, because anytime you're in an altered
Am
state,
I turning
it's
red?
just, you just don't know how you're going to feel. So if this is something that's within the context of a, you know, trusting relationship, then I think it's fine to bring cannabis in. But um, if you're trying something out with a new partner, you're really better off trying this on your own, seeing how you feel, you know,
Mm-hmm.
touching your body
Yeah,
and
a little
figuring out.
familiarity with the strain, right? And how it's
Absolutely,
going to work
absolutely.
in that
And
situation.
so, in terms of products, though, I actually love the weed lubes. I feel like Foria makes a really excellent one. There's a company called Quim that we love, and I have endometriosis, and one
Mm-hmm.
of the symptoms of endometriosis can be painful sex. And so, I
Mm-hmm.
talk to a lot of women who have pain with sex, and the weed lubes, whether they have CBD or THC, can be incredibly, incredibly helpful. So
Wow.
that's something that has been, I hand them out to friends. I'm like, just take it.
Okay.
Tell me what you
I'll have
think
to.
later.
I'll have to.
And no one's given them back. No one said no.
Well, I'm going to have to incorporate that into my arsenal. Yes, indeed. So, well, thank you for that. And how long have you been smoking weed, by the way?
You know, I was thinking about it. I mean, I got my medical card in California in 2016. You know, I definitely I was trying to think, probably in high school, the first time that I tried. And then I
Mm-hmm.
spent a summer in college where I feel like but what's kind of funny and what we talk about a lot is, in my life anyway, my access to cannabis really depended on a man.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, if I had a friend, if I was dating someone, then I had it around. And if I didn't, I probably didn't have it around. And so
Right.
that's why we're so excited that legalization brings access to women where you can just walk in and buy whatever you want.
Yeah, and you don't have to go to some connection where he makes you sit there and talk to him for 20 minutes, whatever. Just to
Which
get
makes
some
a lot
weed.
of women uncomfortable. You know,
Oh,
I moved
yeah.
to New York
Oh,
City
yeah.
after college, and I remember, you know, I've always liked weed and I would have loved to have had it, but I just didn't really feel comfortable having
Mm-hmm.
some strange man know where I lived, come to my apartment, things
Yeah.
like that,
Well, I sold weed.
that
People came to me, and many women came to me. I never made them uncomfortable, but yeah, I can see how that would be going to connections, and yeah. Um, so, do you think pot preferences differ between guys and girls?
I mean, the data will tell you that women are more interested in form factors that are easy and are similar to things that they're already comfortable with. So drinks right now,
Right.
things like and other cannabis drinks seem to have a market share of like 80 to 90% women.
Oh, wow.
Edibles, I think low dose edibles
Mm-hmm.
especially are very popular with women. You know, the spectrum of how women come to cannabis is so different. I feel like for women who have consistently had cannabis in their life prior to where we are with legalization, then they already kind of have it wired, know exactly what they want. But I think for women who are coming to it because there's access and because they can walk into a store or call delivery, having a form factor that they're comfortable with and more accustomed to kind of in the flow of their day or the flow of their evening seems to be something um, that we have really found women are extremely curious about.
Mm-hmm. And do you think there's a lot bigger percentage of women smoking nowadays than there was before legalization, or
You
using
know,
cannabis in some
I
form?
feel like the vaping crisis changed the dynamic, because one of the things
Mm-hmm.
that women always talk about is wanting to have a discreet experience,
Mm-hmm.
and vaping versus lighting up a joint is really different. I have a 3-year-old,
Yeah.
taking a little hit off of a vape outside my door is very different than lighting up a joint.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so just from a smell perspective.
Yeah. Well, I used to take
um,
a hit off my vape pen for lunch, when I played hacky sack with the students. What the hell? That was a tangent.
Definitely. It's
Yeah.
really easy. And so I think it remains to be seen whether people will come back to whether new consumers will come back to vapes, or whether they're just going to experiment with edibles or play
Mm-hmm.
around with tinctures or something like that. But discretion absolutely is something that women ask us a lot of questions about, and want to find something that they can just decide to be private about.
Yeah. Well, not everybody's comfortable wearing the Cali High hat. What the hell? So, I know you've touched on best strains for endometriosis, Crohn's, menopause, and lupus. Briefly, what are those preferred strains and methods of use?
Sure. Well, yes, we have an episode that came out a week or so ago, and another one coming out next week about
Mm-hmm.
autoimmune diseases. And I spoke to 2 women who had incredible stories of really stumbling into cannabis and finding that it was an incredible solution to the medical issues that they were suffering from. And so autoimmune diseases affect about 8 to 10% of the population. And of that, 2 to 1 women are diagnosed. So this is really something that women struggle with a lot. And the women that I spoke to, so for Crohn's disease, inhalation is the method
Mm-hmm.
that is most recommended by medical professionals. It's
Yeah.
fast, and it really, really helps with a lot of the symptoms. For
Yeah.
something like lupus, smoking isn't as recommended. I think that tinctures and soft gels, edibles, longer lasting
Mm-hmm.
is more important. For endometriosis, CBD works for me. I actually
Mm-hmm.
don't even need any THC.
Oh,
So I
wow.
take a mixture of CBD soft gels and tinctures. Suppositories can be really helpful for menstrual pain.
Mm-hmm.
And CBD or THC suppositories are becoming more available, and women are finding extremely fast relief. And you don't have to, I don't use any pharmaceuticals anymore. The 2 women I spoke to don't use any pharmaceuticals. They've
Oh, yeah.
exclusively been able to focus on cannabis.
Yeah. Well, that's excellent. That is totally excellent.
And
So,
strains.
mm-hmm.
These are, anecdotal for sure.
Yeah.
But
The science.
when I spoke to Tamika, who had Crohn's disease, her
Mm-hmm.
most favorite strain was Blue Dream. And then
Mm-hmm.
Christine De La Rosa, who actually runs the People's Dispensary, has lupus, and she loves Granddaddy Perp.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. 2 completely different types of weed, you know. If I'm correct, I think that the Blue Dream came from a Colombian gold strain. I'm not sure, but it sure does taste like it. And of course, Granddaddy Perp came, I believe, from Nepalese, which is a completely different part of the world. So, well, thank you. And I noticed you endorse supporting women-owned cannabis businesses. I think that's a great idea. And I wanted to ask you, who are some of the women in cannabis in California we should know about?
Sure. Well, I live in the Bay Area, and so I definitely have a network that's here. Christine De La Rosa, who I just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
who spoke in our lupus episode, is the co-founder and CEO of the People's Dispensary, which has locations in California and in Oregon. There's another women-owned dispensary service called Sava that has amazing products, great service, and most of their, at least 50% of their products are all women, LGBTQ, people
Uh-huh.
of color owned. So a really great place if you're looking to experiment.
That's cool.
One of my favorite flower companies is Pure Beauty,
Mm-hmm.
which is women owned, and I just think they make amazing products. They have a CBD baby strain that's 10% CBD and 7% THC, and it just is the most relaxing, fun, fantastic experience. So that's a great one.
What's that name again?
Pure Beauty.
Pure Beauty. Wow. Okay. And is that a Northern California company?
No, all available all across California.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm going to look for that. All right. So I have a specific question. What would you tell a woman that had a bad experience eating too many edibles and then has been afraid to smoke or ingest cannabis since then?
I have this conversation with a lot of women,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that the first thing that I would say is, for me, even 10 milligrams of THC is way too much. I
Mm-hmm.
really like, in an edible, I like 2.5 grams to maybe 5, and I want there to be equal parts of CBD, if not more CBD.
Yeah, I like one
And
to one.
so, yeah, at least a 1-to-1.
Yeah.
And it's such a long lasting way to consume cannabis that
Mm-hmm.
if you don't like how you feel, looking at having that feeling for the next 6 to 10 hours is no fun. So I can completely relate. And it is part of our mission to not have women have any more bad experiences. So people in cannabis always say, start low, start slow. That can be confusing if you don't know what that means exactly, but
Yeah.
just start with a low dose. Do
Mm-hmm.
not mess around with, like, cutting a gummy bear into 4 pieces. Just go to a dispensary, find a 2 to 2.5 milligram THC. I suggest like a 3-to-1 to start.
Yeah, yeah,
Don't have
yeah.
much to do, and just try it. And I think that one of the things that we try to do a lot is sort of compare the experience that you may have with something that you're familiar with. So a 3-to-1 edible for me can be like having a beer.
Uh-huh.
That's sort of how it feels. And so I think that if you're talking to a woman who you think could benefit from cannabis, asking how she likes to feel is a great question. Do you like to feel like you've had a glass of champagne, or do you like to feel like you've just had 2 or 3 glasses of wine? And based on that, you can determine the amount of THC. But I really, really recommend, especially for new consumers, have an equal amount of CBD. It's a full plant. Get the benefits of
Oh
the full
yeah.
plant, and
I think
I
that's
think
a
that
great
that's
recommendation.
the best way to get what you hope to have out of the experience.
Mm-hmm. So how can guys benefit from listening to your show?
Well, we're just giving a lot of how-to information about weed.
Yeah.
And, wherever you are on your knowledge spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
the cannabis industry is moving so fast. Depending on where you live, it's completely different. And so I think practical information is just very helpful
Yeah, absolutely.
wherever you are. And that's definitely what we give. We do focus on women's stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, you know, it, women are 50% of the population.
Absolutely.
So if you hear their stories, you just might learn something and have some fun, and also get a little bit of extra weed knowledge. And there's nothing particularly magical about being a woman and consuming weed. I think that what can happen and what helps women is that cannabis really can medically support women in ways that men don't have.
Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah.
hormonal cycle that women
Mm-hmm.
have every month changes your body completely. And
Yep.
so the
Yep. Yep.
endocannabinoid system can get out of balance. And yeah, I listen in, guys, for sure.
I recommend it. Yeah, you pick up some tips, definitely. So I listened to your episode 62, and you talk about music, creativity, and cannabis. And I just wondered, what do you like to listen to when you get high?
Yeah. Well, so I have a 3-year-old, and I live in an apartment in San Francisco, and it's, 15 months into COVID. So
Yeah,
my
yeah.
music has definitely been leaning more towards what can be calm and mellowing.
Mm-hmm.
So I listen to a lot of classical, I listen to a lot of jazz. But on Saturday night, one of my most favorite things to do has been to stream the Lincoln Center Orchestra. They've got
Oh,
some
wow.
live albums,
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
have an amazing live album in Cuba. And so my husband and I will often split a joint, and we'll come back into the house and listen to live at Lincoln Center. I lived in New York City for a long time, so it just feels special, even though it's set in Cuba.
Brings you back to
And
home. Huh.
the musicians are amazing. The energy just feels good. I sort of imagine that I'm in this humid, cool place, and so that's
Can
been
you
my
smell
favorite
it?
lately.
So, do you have a favorite weed song?
The songs that I associate most with weed are songs that I listened to in college when I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I was, smoking a lot of weed and just listening by myself or with friends.
Yeah.
And I used to listen to a lot of De La Soul and Tribe Called Quest and The
Mm-hmm.
Far Side, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like those bands all pair pretty well
Oh,
with
yeah.
weed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, before we get off the subject of music, do you have like favorite composers, classical composers that you love to listen to?
I love all of the major megastars,
Mm-hmm.
but Dvorak is actually one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm. A little
I
trippy,
just,
right? Kind of, yeah.
yeah, I just find that whenever there's a song that I think to myself, oh, I really like this, and then I look it up, it always sort of ends up being Dvorak.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, that's cool. I've always been a Gershwin fan myself. I know he's not really, well, he's modern classical, but whatever. I was like imagining myself on a train when I listened to Rhapsody in Blue, leaving New York. So what do you think legalization has meant for women?
Access.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's meant
And
access.
not going to creepy guys.
Yeah, and also
Guys, let me just say this: not all of you are creepy, okay, but there were some of you.
definitely not.
You know who you are.
Women make 80% of household purchasing decisions.
Yeah.
And so as cannabis becomes something that is more available and women are starting to see it as an option for well-being, they now are like, okay, I can walk into Sephora and choose between 2,500 things. I should at least be able to pick between 5 or 10 at a dispensary.
Absolutely.
And so I think that there's a lot of change coming and I think that there's some element of this that's been happening, especially in California and the more mature markets where
Mm-hmm.
companies are just realizing that the woman consumer is going to be an incredible person to have on your side.
Yeah.
We know that women are ambassadors. I mean, women ask me for tips all the time, and I feel like there's just like a viral effect.
Mm-hmm.
The number one question we get is, what should I buy? And women really want to know. And then part of the reason that we did something like the 12 essential strains is not because every woman needs to smoke 12 strains of weed all the time, not because she needs to love all 12, but we want her to find 2 or 3 that are her favorite, that then allow her to start to explore, like, oh, if I really like this strain, then that probably means that I like XYZ. And so that's what we're really trying to help with. And I think that's what's happening already in cannabis with women.
Well, that's cool. And that leads me to my last question, basically, before we go. I know you've already mentioned strains, but what are the 12 essential strains every woman should have, and how did you come up with the list?
Well, this is April Pride was integral to creating this, and we went through a lot of different processes. I think that we knew that we needed to have, and we don't love the convention of sativa, indica, and hybrid because they can be confusing and you don't necessarily feel the way you want when you buy a strain that is labeled in that way. But we knew that we needed to have effects that ranged from people feeling euphoric and excited to more mellow, ready to sleep. So we actually started with CBD strains, so non-intoxicating, and we took a trip from the non-intoxicating all the way up to the more intoxicating. And each of the episodes that we created around these strains are 5 minutes long, and they answer a few questions that we think women have. How's this going to make me feel? What should I do? And so that is really, you can go on and listen to all of them. I've had a long morning. I don't think I can name all 12 for you right now. I'll
put up the list, folks. You'll see it about now, somewhere right up here. Okay. So, well, Ellen, thank you very much for being with Cali High today. But where can our listeners find your podcast?
Yes, you can listen to How to Do the Pot wherever you listen to podcasts. It's available on all the streaming platforms. And you can visit our website at dothepot.com. We're on all the socials, so Do the Pot at Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Excellent.
So hopefully you'll follow along and listen.
Oh, yes, we will. And we'll hope to be checking back in with you in a few months or so and see how things are going. I know you've got all sorts of interesting subjects on your podcast. So, once again, thank you very much for joining Cali High this morning, and have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me. You too.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.